if you are a mother expecting to deliver a baby anytime soon, you need to watch this interview because today I have a very special guest, Miss Eyla Cuenca, who is a childbirth guide, a doula, and a birth trauma alchemist. I am super excited to have her here on the show because I believe she has so much wisdom and insight, things that are not common knowledge in our culture anymore, that I believe in my heart is going to be a game changer to everyone watching this today. Whether you're scared or traumatized by a past birth experience, or you don't know what to expect, or you're looking for a more holistic approach to bringing a life on this earth, you came to the right place. Ayla, I'm so happy that you're here with us today.
I'm so pleased to be here. It's an honor. It's an honor for sure.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to start with this. Personally, I don't have any kids yet, but I've always been intrigued by the childbirth process because I believe that our human experience does not just begin after we start saying our first words. I'm sure you share this belief that we begin to have memories inside ourselves from the moment that we are conceived in our mom's womb, and some might argue even before that too. So could you please share with me what got you into this field in the first place?
Yeah, so I actually started working as an advocate for children in the American legal system. So it's called a guardian ad litem, and basically I was appointed by different judges in the court to visit homes where children were foster children. So they had left their family and the government assigned them to a new family for a temporary amount of time, while their parents sorted out whatever issues they were having. And so my job was to go into the home, spend time with the child, and then write a report on my findings and report it back to the judges and the attorneys. And in that work, I started to ask myself, what is the core issue? How are we arriving at this place where, the woman's role in her nuclear family feels confusing, dysregulated, toxic? Where is the father? Why is this happening, right? Why are these children being displaced in this way? And, many people would argue that we would need more funding for this type of program, or we need more resources for this type of program. And I started to really see it as a Band-Aid solution for what is actually systemic in our culture, modern day society, not just in American culture, for example, but modern day society. And so I started studying birth. I started wanting to understand, how do I go back? How do I go back to see where this is coming from? And I started studying.
But why did you start at birth? What got you interested in the birth process?
Well, as I reverse engineered this experience, I really started to see, okay, it's not so much the first few years. It's not so much what's happening when a child is born. It's the actual coming into the process, the initiation that a woman and a man go through when they become pregnant and when they go through this portal of birth. And so when I started to look at that, I was like, okay, so is there conscious conception happening? And I thought, well, what is the core of the relationship between the man and the woman? And then when I was getting into understand the dynamics of that relationship, I started to see that it goes back to the actual woman's childhood and her experience, right, with her own mother and in the womb. And so I couldn't help but continue to go back and back into the core of what is happening. And so you had said earlier that some might argue a woman or a baby is having experiences well before they're born. They're creating memories and information is being downloaded. And so if we look at, a baby, they are cells inside of their own mother when their mother was inside of their mother, right? Because of the way that eggs work in the ovaries. And so I started to understand epigenetics, right? Which is a different way of looking at genetics, understanding that a cell is impacted by its environment. It's the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton. And this is where I really started to feel a lot of passion around creating educational opportunities for pregnancy, conception, and birth, rather than worrying myself with all of these Band-Aid solutions. I was trying to get to the core of how I could start to create awareness around consciousness in this field.
Dr. Bruce Lipton actually was one of the first teachers I had encountered on my journey with his book, The Biology of Belief. I'm sure you've read it before.
Yeah.
That opened up this portal in my mind that actually it's not our genes that dictate our destiny, but rather our environment. And the good news is we have so much control over that. Which brings me to my next question. Based on your knowledge of how birth is conceived in the minds of millions all over the world in today's society, what's wrong? What are we missing? What's happening that's causing this systematic problem that you've mentioned earlier?
There are a few factors that impact the way we view birth in today's society in modern times. One is our social structure has changed and our family structure has changed. Typically, we for thousands of years, we lived in households that were multi-generational. So we would grow up with aunts and cousins, a grandmother. So there was a woman and a man in the household pretty much at any stage in the human life, anywhere from pre-adolescence, adolescence, childbearing years, menopause, and then nearing death, right? And so a child grew up understanding the cycle of life much more clearly. And that in itself is an education and a laying of a foundation. But since we live in these kind of pods now where it's just, man, woman, and child, and we have to travel to see family, there's distance, there's so much division. We don't have that same type of unity. We don't have that same type of education. So childbirth and what it is to even be married in a particular type of way has really gone out of our scope of understanding. And now we have to take classes, and now we have to theorize, and now we have to pay professionals to explain to us how to exist in this way. And so a lot of the fear around childbirth is it's become distant from us, and it's been hijacked by conventional medicine. So now we believe that we record.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean?
Because I believe we're going to begin to stir the pot here when we attack the medical institution. Go ahead.
Well, we didn't start birthing in hospitals until about 100 years ago. So before.
Which many people think we've always been delivering babies.
Right. So we were working with birth professionals, midwives, or whatever you'd like to call them. We have so many different words, nurses, right? Things like that. We were working with these women who specialized, who had this knowledge and this wisdom for generations and generations passed through their family. But really in Western Europe, in around the 1850s, I would say we started to bring the male physician into the picture. And, they were studying childbirth and anatomy from a book and from cadavers. And then they started to integrate themselves into childbirth. And then this was happening in New York and London. Hospitals started designing wings in the hospital that were dedicated to childbirth. And they started saying, well, what's something that's happening every day all over the earth that we could participate in, from a medical standpoint? Well, childbirth, right? It's a cash cow, to put it crudely. It's a really good business model. And so they started advertising, they started getting the male physician involved, and women began birthing in hospitals with twilight sleep, general anesthesia, and they started figuring out a way to make it seem more desirable. You can come here to this institution, you don't have to feel anything, and we can take care of your baby for a few days after you give birth, So it seemed for a woman who had 6 children at home in maybe cramped quarters, wow, this sounds like a good idea. I can get some support, right? So as modern society was shifting away from community and away from tribal living, the medical institution was also kind of apprehending the birth space at the same time. So it made sense. And so that was the beginning of it. And it really by the 1940s in Western Europe and America and Canada, I'd say 60% of women were birthing in hospitals. And now we're at pretty much 99% of women are birthing in hospitals all over the world. But that really didn't start to happen until the turn of last century. So that's what I mean when I say it was hijacked. It's something that really the conventional medical system didn't have a part in. And so, unfortunately, the other thing that contributes to the fear around pregnancy, around childbirth is Hollywood, right? I don't know how many times we've seen a film or a depiction of birth where the woman is in an urgent situation, right? It is urgent that she get to the hospital. It's urgent that she get under medical care, and it's urgent that she gets hooked up to everything in order for everything to now be safe, calm, peaceful. So that's really ingrained in our subconscious, that we require something that is outside of us in order to do something our body is naturally designed to do. God designed us this way. So
how much of what we know about delivering a baby is a myth? Because the first image that comes to my mind is a woman that's going through hell, screaming, yelling, going through all sorts of, horrors. How much of that is true, and how much of that is just programming to turn this natural process into a commodity, like you've mentioned before, so that it could turn hospitals into, some profit?
I would say perhaps all of it is a myth, except the spark inside each woman where she knows that her body was made to do this.
Wow.
And so it's about accessing that spark and working to dismantle those myths or fears and repatterning. Yeah.
I'm sure so many people listening right now are very confused, because are you telling me that giving birth is not supposed to be painful?
I'm saying it's not supposed to be dangerous, it's not supposed to be painful, and it's not supposed to be something that's bigger than you.
Wow. And how can we go back to this place where a woman can actually go through this beautiful phenomena and enjoy herself and not go through torture?
Do you have 8 weeks?
Not at the moment, but what's the theory? Where should we go?
So I would say that first, this is not about there being a right way to birth, or this is not about right or wrong. And this is not about removing a woman from her reality so that she can do something that is completely foreign to her and uncomfortable for her. It's about being curious and knowing that there's another way, right? Childbirth is not something that you should close your eyes, brace for impact, and hope you wake up on the other side okay. How many women do we know where you ask them, would you do that again? And they say, oh, no, but I love my child. I'm so happy I'm on the other side. So we want to remove the things that cause birth trauma, because a woman who doesn't experience birth trauma has a more connected mothering journey, has a more connected relationship to her husband, has a more connected experience to herself moving forward. But childbirth is something that you never forget. I mean, I work with women in their 60s who are still talking about their experience in childbirth. And so what we can start to do is look at the main fears, right? When I ask a couple, I'm working one-on-one with them. I say, what are your main concerns about this process? And they say, well, what if something bad happens? That's the main thing.
Is that the most common answer you get?
Yes, we're scared something bad could happen, or that something dangerous could happen. So there's an idea that birth is inherently dangerous. Again, Hollywood, again, the medical system, kind of creates an idea that we need to depend on them to be safe. So I ask them, what are the specific fears? They can't often give me a specific answer. Some might say, oh, what if the umbilical cord is wrapped around the baby's neck and, we need to have a C-section. So I explained to them that babies, in the womb, they don't use their nose or mouth to breathe. They don't breathe like us. They receive oxygen through the umbilical cord. So if an adult out of the womb, has a cord wrapped around their neck, it could choke them. But in the womb, a baby could have the cord wrapped 3 times and they're totally happy. They're totally fine, because this is not where they receive oxygen. They're not breathing. So if
This goes against everything I've ever heard about this umbilical cord thing. This is amazing. So you're telling me it's completely natural and safe if that happened during the delivery?
Yes. And so with that 4-minute exchange, something has just unlocked for these 2 people. And now they're feeling more ease. And now perhaps they're feeling more curious. Okay, what are my other fears? What if I hemorrhage after birth? Right? Okay, well, let's understand how hemorrhage works, and what causes hemorrhage. So I'll give you an example here. It's a little bit more medical jargon, but I will keep it, I'll keep it straightforward. So Pitocin, which is a synthetic form of oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone that we produce in pregnancy, really during labor and birth, and then postpartum after the birth. So what the oxytocin can do, one of the things it can do is that it can contract the uterus. So when a woman is receiving an induction to try to get the baby out early or, on demand, they'll give her oxytocin and it'll expand and contract the uterus. It'll fake labor. And so when a woman is given that in her labor process, her natural ability to produce oxytocin goes to sleep. It goes offline, right? And so when that goes offline, because now there's a synthetic version of it being given to her, when the baby is born, there's no oxytocin being produced and she will hemorrhage. So a lot of people don't understand that hemorrhages often happen when a woman has already received synthetic oxytocin in her process.
Because of artificial induction.
Yes.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
When they say, I'm worried about this happening, I say, okay, if we can avoid these interventions before and aim for a more natural experience, you can avoid these side effects that we think are just a natural part of birth, but they're actually caused by medical interventions very often.
That's fascinating. I wonder if that has any link to postpartum depression, since you mentioned lower levels of oxytocin. Do you have any idea if those two are related?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely related because a woman now her body has to work to produce the oxytocin levels needed for her recovery, right? So the body will actually start to heal itself with these higher levels of oxytocin, and the mood will be more regulated. So when a woman receives that, it does interfere with her natural ability to produce oxytocin. And another factor that can lead to postpartum depression is when a woman has a lot of separation from her infant immediately following the birth, because the skin-to-skin contact is what produces more oxytocin in her body. So it's very natural.
And we see that in C-section, for example.
Yes. So
all right.
A woman has to be separated after the C-section. It's a major abdominal surgery. And then women put babies in another room to sleep immediately following the birth, which is another type of separation. So as animals, if we can smell each other within the same room, her body will continue to produce the oxytocin. Some women get nannies immediately following the birth, so the baby starts spending less time with the mother. So there are many factors in modern day society that do interrupt and kind of hijack this natural hormonal process, this beautiful biological unfolding of this experience. And then we just want to call it, postpartum depression is something that is genetic.
I get you. I have this ability to predict what people might think when you say something like that. And I think a lot of women might argue, well, after giving birth, I might be terribly exhausted. I can't take care of myself, neither the baby. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. So what are the ways in which women have historically received the support they need to be able to mother? They were not cooking for themselves. They were not cleaning for themselves. They had the support of women. However, now we have to hire people, and of course it is a privilege to do those things. So my suggestion always, because I get this question a lot, is enlist support that does everything else besides your role of mother.
Okay. So you can have this ability to stay in contact with the baby as much as you can.
And learn the language of your baby. Learn and go through
What do you mean by that?
Well, the cues, right? So when a baby starts to make a fist in their sleep, we know that within 3 to 4 minutes, the baby's going to wake up hungry. So the fist closing is a sign of hunger. So we can catch the baby and breastfeed them just before they dysregulate and their cortisol levels rise. So we can start to understand the rhythm and the cues. And that's what I mean by language. We can start to notice if we watch the eyelids, for example, the eyes will move back and forth. And that's an indicator the baby's going to wake up soon to feed. So there's things like that if we don't go through the initiation of contact with our infant, we don't learn. And women start to say, I feel overwhelmed. I don't understand my child. I need to hire a specialist to explain to me how to even help them sleep. And that's really because there is no support in that connected type of mothering.
I get you. So I'm very curious about everything you're sharing with me because it's all brand new to me. When you said we do that to avoid the baby dysregulating, so what happens if, for example, I don't preemptively feed the baby before they wake up and their cortisol is already high? What happens then?
What happens is we have a dysregulated baby and we have then a dysregulated mother or parents. Because I'm sure that you've touched on this in your own studies and research and work, that when we can't hold an emotion in our body, it's very difficult to witness someone else having an emotion in their experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so many women, they want it to stop, they want the crying to stop, they want the dysregulation to stop, and so they become more stressed, and then they both start to elevate and dysregulate together. And so if a woman can hold that in her body and say, okay, the baby's crying, the baby's going to get fed, I'm going to maintain a groundedness in my being, everything's fine, no one's around, I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing, but I'm doing my best. They start to feed the baby and the baby will slowly come down from that. But if the mother starts to escalate equally, then it can be kind of a disaster where she'll start to feel anxiety at the thought of even being alone with her baby.
Mm-hmm. And then it just feeds this vicious cycle of stress between the mother and the baby.
Yeah, and she
That makes so much sense.
starts to believe she can't do it on her own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to the whole how to deal with a baby segment. But before, you mentioned some myths that women have and men as well about pregnancy. What are some of those common myths you keep hearing from the clients that you work with? Other than, the umbilical cord wrapping around the baby's neck.
Sure. One of them is that childbirth is very painful and the pain is unnecessary to experience, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say that the sensations, I like to call it sensations, intense sensations. So when a woman has not prepared for this experience, when a woman has not reconnected with her body in this experience, either through yoga or movement or noticing what she's eating in the pregnancy, how does it make her feel? Is she resting? So these experiences throughout the pregnancy that connect us can actually help prepare us for the sensations of labor and birth. And so when we allow labor to unfold naturally and we understand the anatomy and the physiology of the process, it really kind of demystifies what we consider to be a mystery, So when women understand their anatomy and they start to feel the sensations of labor beginning, they have healthy, realistic expectations where they say, this could last 12 hours. I'm gonna conserve my energy. I'm going to go on a walk. I'm going to take a bath. All of these techniques that are time tested, throughout history, as an anthropology major, I learned so much about childbirth and the practices around how to just naturally move through the process. And so as the woman's sensations are increasing in intensity, her body is receiving signals, her brain is receiving signals to release certain types of hormones to increase her tolerance of pain. And so it's this gradual incline. And when she gets to the point of actually giving birth, it's never like she experienced pain that was bigger than her. It was just an increase of intensity. But when a woman has stayed disconnected from her body, has not prepared, chose not to dive deep into understanding the process, she'll start to resist the sensations. And then that resistance is what makes pain. And when she loses that control, the best way to get the control back is through an epidural, where she says, now I'm on top of my body again, and my body's not going to tell me what to do. I'm going to tell my body what to do. And that's why we see delays in labor. Women never progress because now the brain's not receiving a signal where it says, okay, I'm not feeling the sensations anymore. So what are we doing here? Are we still having a baby? So this is how the epidural can really interrupt the process, and women end up in emergency C-sections.
I got you. Aside from the epidural making the process even more painful in a way, what other side effects or pains or damages could this chemical create in the woman?
Right. So the epidural contains fentanyl and lidocaine. And what can happen here is, of course, it reaches the baby. It's absorbed into the cerebral spinal fluid, which goes up to the woman's brain. and absorbs, and then it redistributes into the bloodstream. So the idea that the drugs in the epidural don't reach the baby and they stay maintained in the cerebral spinal fluid is a myth. And so within 15 minutes, the baby has now received those same chemicals at an adult dose, right? And so the impact that it can have is that a baby is born with jaw mechanisms.
Drugged, basically.
Drugged, yes. Yes, to put it simply, they're born drugged and they don't have the same impulses, the same reflexes, and the same mechanism and vigor to breastfeed. So we see kind of listless babies who are not connecting, and infants within that first hour have these different steps that they take to initiate. And so they do a breast crawl, meaning if you put them on the woman's chest, they'll actually start using their abdomen to get closer to the mother's chest. We see babies have reflexes with the tongue. We see babies have reflexes with the legs. And so with the epidural, it can delay all of that. And so then the baby goes into observation. The respiratory system is a little bit depressed from the fentanyl. And so then the baby is now being observed for maybe an hour or two, separated from the mother. And so what women don't realize is that because of these myths and these concepts around pain and around childbirth, they opt for what they think is a quick solution. And they don't ever learn the side effects for herself and for the baby. And of course, the doctor is not going to go deeply into the physical side effects, the psycho-spiritual side effects of receiving this procedure. They just tell you it's safe. And in the event that something changes, we always can rely on a C-section. That's our final measure, but we always have that. And so it's not really made clear the impact that this choice can have. And again, it's not wrong, but this is about informed consent. So if you're choosing something and you're doing something to your baby, you really want to know all of the pros and cons, and most women just don't.
I understand. The way you're describing it, it almost sounds like the hospital turned into a factory, and those rooms are like assembly lines where it's just something that's being operated on, basically, instead of a process or a phenomena happening, and someone is there to facilitate it. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been to so many hospital births over the last decade, and so many births in a birth center, which is an out-of-hospital center, a little bit less medicalized. And then I've been at many home births, and I see the difference in the woman's connection to the experience, right? In the hospital, she's surrounded by strangers. Perhaps her partner is there, perhaps her sister, but the nurses she's never met. Maybe the doctor is there if they're not, on call somewhere else. And so in this very intimate, life-changing initiation, she is not around her comforts and where she feels the safest and the most grounded. She's in a place where we go when we are sick or when we're in urgent care. We need urgent care. We have an emergency. So she's entering a field that is often riddled with fear, and it's often riddled with urgency. And so that's not where birth needs to live. I understand there's always...
Are you saying a home birth, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but are you saying a home birth could be safer than a traditional birth in a hospital? I'm sorry to use the word traditional, but in our society today, that's the mainstream way to deliver a baby.
I am saying that. I am saying that. I'm not saying that that's 110% true, depending on the woman's pre-existing conditions, right? If a woman has certain chronic illness or diseases or factors that wouldn't permit her to birth naturally at home, then, that's what the hospital is there for. However, most women just assume that's where she's got to go. Healthy women in their 30s with no issues, the pregnancy is totally viable and stable, and she'll go to a place that is made for medical emergency.
I get you. I have a couple more questions about the epidural. What if a woman says, what if I go through a 12-hour labor or a 20-hour labor and I can't take the pain anymore? What do you have to say about that?
So I've definitely been part of births as a doula, right? A doula is like an emotional and physical support coach throughout the pregnancy and the birth and the postpartum. And so as a doula, I've been at births that last quite a long time. The labor goes over the span of 2 days. And at a certain point, the woman might say, you know, I feel that I'm ready to transfer to a hospital, get an epidural so I can sleep and regroup. And she understands all of the implications, and it's completely her choice. And that is fine, right? However, many women don't learn in general conservation techniques. They don't have a doula. They don't have a supportive person in their process. They didn't enlist any of that support. So when they go into labor, they feel alone and they want the support. So they go to the hospital where there's nurses and people that can support them and hold them. So I would say if a woman is already having these ideas that it's going to be really painful and prolonged, I would ask her to enlist different types of support and education, because how many times has a woman felt a contraction? She texts her sister, she calls her friend, she texts a doctor, and she's awake and she's active, and, you know, she burns out. It's the middle of the night and she gets totally exhausted. So I tell my clients, when you wake up in the middle of the night with a sensation, have some tea, go back to sleep. When you can no longer ignore the sensations, right? The contractions are coming every 5 minutes. Now we're awake. Now we pay attention. But everything until then is just the body preparing for actual active labor. So a woman burns herself out early on. So of course, 12 hours later, she's exhausted and she believes she requires the medical support.
So she hasn't been suffering the process, she's been suffering her imagination or her thoughts about what she's expecting to happen.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I get you. And how long is a healthy, normal labor? How long can it go for before we say something is wrong, we have to go to a hospital?
I would say if you're listening to the baby's heart tones and the heart tones sound good, it can go on for 3 days.
Wow. And that's completely natural and normal.
Yes. I mean, if we look at accounts of childbirth throughout history, cross-culturally, women sometimes had labors that were lasting 3 or 4 days, 5 days, but that didn't mean it was highly active the whole time. Maybe the cadence and the rhythm of her labor was very low contractions, but consistent. Some women, they go into labor, it's 3 hours, but it was very high intensity, really quick. And then the baby was born. So it always can look different. Mine lasted 2.5 days, but I thankfully had the conservation techniques to basically just continue on with my life, my duties, my errands, until I really needed to be home and focused. So some people say, wow, 2.5 days. And I say, yeah, but of those 2.5 days, it was really only 14 hours that I actually felt the intensity and the need for focus and the need for support. So I think many women just don't understand that there is an arc in that process. That's why childbirth education is so important for the man and woman. Man as observer or just as husband, right? Just to know, okay, this is normal. That's fine. We don't need to go yet to the hospital. We can wait longer. We can stay at home a little longer. She can take a bath. There's no need to rush, right? Another common myth is that women believe once the water breaks, right, her amniotic fluid releases, she needs to go immediately to the hospital.
And what's the truth?
Because that's what we see in Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
So the truth is that we still want to wait for her to have contractions that are consistently 3 minutes apart. Contractions that are consistently 3 minutes apart, we know the woman is in active labor. And so sometimes the water releases the night before. I say, you know, do what you need to do, get back in bed, call me in the morning.
I love how calm you speak about those topics. I can put myself in the woman's shoes, and that actually makes a lot of sense. And I don't have to panic, basically, just because something natural happened.
Yes, and I'll ask her certain questions based on what she told me. And if there's certain markers about the fluid that sound alarming to me, then I would suggest she go to the hospital or she call her midwife. But for the most part, it's not necessary. And so what we see here in general with this whole experience is that women feel that they need permission in order to do certain things, right? For me to just say, sounds normal, go back to bed, get a good night's sleep, call me in the morning, she just completely relaxes, right? She just needed the permission, and her body already knew, we're fine, the baby's fine. And so I would love women to reclaim this part of their body, this natural physiological process that we've been doing since the beginning, to just know there's so much of this that's normal, but we have sensationalized it. So how do we desensationalize it? And how do we reclaim this process for our body?
I hear you. How do you feel your own pregnancy impacted you and your coaching and your teachings?
It did 100%, my knowledge of this became so much more profound, right? I was working in this field. And then once I did this, it really did take me to another level of really fierce compassion for women in their process, and for the process, and a reverence really for the process in general. And I had very simple, I had a very simple experience. We didn't have a lot. I wasn't able to hire the type of support that, many women can. I was receiving government assistance at the time. However, I was given the support by the father of my daughter for me to just be at home for a few months without interruption to give the baby everything the baby needed. And that's really what I would say made the biggest difference in my whole experience, because I had that support, I had that containment and that holding. I didn't feel that I was in survival mode. And that can really impact a woman's experience with her birth and her pregnancy and her postpartum. And so, yes, I was working in the pregnancy. Yes, I had a lot of demands, but I knew that I was supported.
I see. And you said you gave your daughter what she needed. What is it exactly that you feel in the first few months, the most crucial thing that a baby needs from their mother?
Constant contact. And so as a society, and it's different in every culture, right? In Latin culture, where I come from, they say that if you hold your baby too much or you give it too much attention, you're going to spoil it. And it's going to become very dependent on you. And it's not going to become a healthy, well-adjusted child.
Is that another myth?
Yes.
No, it's a true.
Surprise, surprise. So if we look at the principles of attachment parenting, for example, we call it attachment parenting now. Dr. Sears calls it attachment parenting, but really it's just the way that mammals have parented since the beginning. And it's really not separating the mother and the baby until the baby initiates its individuation. So if we look at different tribes, for example, the babies stayed on the mother, in a sling, in a baby carrier, until the baby was, walking and able to contribute to the community or to the tribe. So boys would individuate from the mother around 5 years old and begin doing activities with the father and learning the ways of the man. And the girls would then start doing their own activities and coming off of the mother, spending more time with other women and individuating in that way. But until then, the baby, that child, knew that the mother was their anchor. And so if we look at the psychology behind it, when a child knows that their mother is not going anywhere, that there is security and safety, the child actually builds more confidence and courage in taking bigger steps and risks. But when the child doesn't believe that there's someone waiting for them just a few feet away, they're not going to want to leave. They're going to become anxiously attached to that mother.
It's counterintuitive.
So
we thought it's the other way around.
We think it's the other way around. And so, of course, children reach age 5, 6, they start to understand what manipulation is. They start to understand that certain actions garner certain results, but you can't apply that to an infant. And so, the World Health Organization recommends breastfeeding for 2 years. The Quran recommends breastfeeding for 2 years. There are so many texts that we see and so much time-tested advice on no separation for at least those first 2 years. However, because of capitalism and other influences, women are separating from their babies after 6 weeks to 3 months. And so we see a highly dysregulated society, highly anxiously attached children, and we wonder why.
And those children eventually grow up to seek this feeling that they never had at home with other people, and then we create those painful relationships with others until we realize the root cause of this trauma that we've been carrying for so many years. And it just began when we were just a few months old.
Exactly. And people, another myth is that, babies are unconscious. They don't remember anything. They're just this blob, right? They don't speak. So I can say and do whatever around them and they won't remember it, but they do. The body remembers everything. The body doesn't experience chronological time the way that the mind does. And so if something is experienced in infancy, the body holds on to that. And so in adulthood, when something triggers that somatic, right, that body memory, it can feel like it's happening all over again, and we don't understand why. And so pain inflicted on a child, being lost or left or abandoned, right, the body of that child is remembering, and so it becomes a reoccurring cycle in our adolescence and our adulthood. And so why can't we offer that to our children, right? Something so simple as presence and connection. And breastfeeding is one of those ways that women do offer that to their infant. But we've also come into a lot of tension and turmoil with breastfeeding as something that is offered, which we don't realize is impacted by how we give birth. Breastfeeding is often disturbed by the way in which a woman gives birth.
Could you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. You had said it earlier, right? With the C-section and the separation. So when a woman receives a C-section, her body did not experience the natural mode of birth. And when a woman goes through the natural mode of birth, there are so many signals sent to the body saying, we've just given birth, we've just had a baby, everything is set off, we're going to start producing milk, we're going to start releasing oxytocin. So of course her mind knows she's given birth because she sees a baby, she's had a C-section, but the body sometimes is confused about whether it gave birth or not. And so then she might not produce milk postpartum. So then she might be cornered into formula feeding and bottle feeding, which already unfortunately creates a disconnection between the mother and the baby. Because maybe other people are now feeding the baby, not the mother. There is a degree of separation between a baby with the bottle, right? Because when there's skin-to-skin contact, on-demand breastfeeding, she's releasing hormones, the baby's releasing hormones, the baby's saliva on the mother stimulates certain hormones that also form more bonding. Nighttime milk is different than daytime milk. And so there's so many perfectly designed systems with the breastfeeding that are missed out on because of the bottle feeding. And women don't make the connection. They just don't know. And so I would say, if you can avoid a C-section, try to do it at all costs, right? And if you have the choice, really educate yourself on the benefits. And there are so many to not doing a C-section.
What's the single worst thing a pregnant woman can do during her pregnancy or during the delivery of the baby that could, create the worst outcome?
From what I've seen over the last decade, like one of the two choices that she can make regarding her birth that can really change the outcome for life are electing an induction or electing an epidural.
Okay. So these are the two worst things.
Yeah.
Because of the hormone imbalances it creates, or is there something else?
The hormone imbalances that it creates, and of course the effects of the drugs themselves on the mother and the baby.
Okay.
And I work with women from preconception all the way into the toddler years that they're sharing with their child. And I see how medicalized births impact the relationship that they have impact the health of the baby. There's a great documentary called Microbirth. It was created by a few doctors and researchers, and they see how when a baby is born via C-section, they miss out on receiving a wealth of bacteria from the mother that actually sets their immune system up for life. And so, unfortunately, epidurals and inductions are the leading causes of C-sections. If we're looking at C-sections and the actual rates of emergencies, like true emergencies, it's going to be under 10%. However, we have a 68% C-section rate, for example, in the United States, because most of them are caused by choosing epidurals, caused by choosing induction. That's not an emergency. That's a self-induced C-section emergency. That makes sense.
I've heard you say somewhere a crazy statistic that in Brazil, I believe you said 99% of all deliveries are through.
Culturally, C-section in Brazil is just the widely accepted norm. People, will conceive at a certain time, they'll set up a date, they'll set up a party, it's really just part of the culture now. So natural, normal, physiological birth is pretty rare at this point. And I would say in most of Latin America, natural birth is becoming very obsolete.
That's crazy.
So
I feel one of the greatest shifts that led to this phenomena of people avoiding the natural way, our relationship with pain, because we live in a society that is always pumping in front of our faces through ads and other means that pain is bad. Here's a way to avoid it. You just take this pill, take this, whatever this thing is, and you don't have to experience it anymore. And it's like it's shifting us away from the natural balance of the universe, of life, where we live in a plane of duality. There is pleasure, but there is also pain. And it's no coincidence that I believe God, in His infinite wisdom, chose for the most incredible thing in life, which is life itself, coming into this life through a gateway of pain. And for us to completely numb that and choose for something that is just comfortable and convenient, I feel that's not just a disservice to the woman herself and the baby, but to the spirituality behind it. It's a disservice to life. I'd like to hear what you think about this.
Yeah, it's a disservice to life. It's a dishonoring of this process, of this gift, really. And our capacity to experience pleasure is, in my perception, directly correlated to our capacity to hold pain. And so, we also look at trials and tribulations as, challenges as something that's wrong or something that's bad, something that's happening to us, right? And I always say that victimhood is the only human pathology because when we get into this space of feeling like it's happening to us and we're downtrodden, we do whatever we can to avoid it. We don't alchemize it. We don't see that there's actually a reward behind it, right? Sitting in it, allowing it to teach us something. There is a reward behind that. And so, a lot of us have gone very far away from spirituality, far away from God. A lot of us have experienced trauma in our lives. And the best way to not confront that and alchemize it is to desensitize. And so, look, we have so many tools now. We have our cell phones. We have Netflix, we have vapes, we have all kinds of things that allow us to auto-regulate immediately before the sensations get too big.
And that just creates weak humans that are dependent on substance just to feel okay.
Weak in the body, weak in the heart, weak in the mind. And so what can we do? We can learn ways of self-regulating, not auto-regulating, where we go on autopilot to make it stop or suppress it. We learn to self-regulate. How do I create the capacity to feel this? How do I know that what I experienced 25 years ago is not happening now? I'm in this room, there's 4 walls and a ceiling, right? We understand our environment. We come back to our breathing, we feel ourselves in our body, and we trust, right? We surrender and we trust. And so we don't have those skills. No one's teaching that in school, right? We're teaching kids about molten rock and magma. We're not teaching them about self-regulation.
I get you.
So
a couple of times we've already mentioned God in this conversation, and many people don't know actually how this conversation came to life. And the quick story is, for anyone listening to us, I was on Instagram and a video popped up on my feed. It was about a comedian sharing a story on stage. His name was Ahmed, I believe. And his story was, he was born to a father who was originally Jewish, and he converted to Islam. And Eyla actually left a comment on that video saying that that's her story as well. She grew up in a family that is Jewish, and later on in life found her way to Islam. And I love that we shifted gears into this topic now, because I have so many questions for you. Could you please walk me through how this happened, how this came to be, starting from your early childhood? What was it like growing up? Was your family religious? What happened?
Yeah, my family was religious. Is religious. My mother is Jewish, and my stepfather is Jewish. So I grew up going to a Hebrew school and Sunday school, and I went through my Bat Mitzvah, and I went through Hebrew High, which is just kind of the later years in adolescence, going to the synagogue every day and learning Torah and Talmud. And I went through the entire kind of classic arc of a Jewish American. And
what was your relationship with God back at that stage in your life? What was your relationship with the religion?
In retrospect, I see that often when a child is born into a religion, things feel compulsory. They feel second nature. They feel like we do this simply because this is what we do. And that's why I'll come back to this when we go more into the future of the experience. But, when you find your connection to God on your own, it means so much more. It can mean so much more, rather than someone telling you what it's supposed to mean. And so, for me, the Jewish community really supported my family in very difficult times. So, what I will always hold in my heart is that we had a lot of support through different challenges, economic challenges, family transitions. But as far as the way that I was connecting with Source, with God, it was not there. And then when I married, there was an even bigger disconnection that happened because there were just some changes, right? Where I was with someone who was not as observant, and I started feeling like I was confused and free falling and not sure, not being led. And so.
Did he also come from a Jewish background?
A different religion, but, it was approved by my family to do that because there was like a certain level of religiosity and spirituality that was acceptable. But then once there, it wasn't the case. And so, a lot of things came to light. And after my separation, I decided, I'm ready to reconnect. And I prayed for a sign to show me the path that I was going to start walking on my own. And
did you reach a place where you stopped believing completely?
Never.
Or what was that like in that
Never, but
stage
I felt
of confusion? I don't know if confusion is the right word.
I never stopped believing that there is an omnipresence. That never ever left me. But it was kind of this reconciliation that perhaps the framework and the structure that I had been in for a long time was not my path anymore. And that it.
What made you think that?
What made me think that was there were a lot of Zionists that kind of I've crossed paths with throughout my life, and it never felt right to me. I always had this feeling like this sounds really unlike what is being taught in the religion. This is not the religion. And I think at that juncture, about 2.5 years ago, I really kind of felt like I wanted nothing to do with it anymore, like all of it, like the structure, the framework, the culture, there was almost like this death that happened, and I knew that there was a rebirth coming, and I wasn't sure exactly what it was going to look like. And so when I prayed to be shown where to walk, I waited about 2 days, and then in the mail, a client of mine, who is now a very good friend, I would say someone that I met on the internet, who I was helping a little bit with advice around pregnancy and birthing, she sent me a Quran in the mail, and
Wow.
I said, okay, I'm going to read this. So I read the clear translation, the clear Quran translation, and I said, this is it.
The entirety of it?
Yes.
Wow. And you started from, Surah Al-Fatiha all the way to the end of
in
the
about
Quran?
5 months. So I joined.
Wow. Can you walk me through this phase? This is very interesting. What was it like when you first picked it up? What were your first impressions?
My first impression was,
What happened?
this is definitely going to be a solo journey. No one in my life is going to, like, at first I thought, well, I'm just learning something, because I love learning. I will try most anything once, I will research it, I will experience it, just so that I can understand, right? I'm a student of life. So I'm going to read this. And then I thought, well, what if I connect to this?
Did you link it to the prayer you made
Of
just a few days
course.
before? Or
It's like, it was like an istikhara in a sense of, you know what I do not know, you see what I cannot see. And so show me what I need to know, basically. So it was a version of that, and about this juncture in my life. And so I asked myself, what if I connect to this? And instantly it was, the people around me are conditional. Will they accept me? Right? So there was a moment where I thought, if I choose this, or if I connect to this, if I want to walk towards this, will I lose connection? And that is a huge thing in our human existence and our human psychology, is that we self-betray in order to avoid losing connection with those we love. We withhold in order to...
That's so beautiful. We self-betray in order to avoid losing connection with the people we love. That's so beautiful. And how did you come up with this courage to be willing to risk that?
Yeah, so it was a moment in my life where I was, let's say, rock bottom, right? As far as everything felt like it was possible, and I had a lot of agency to choose, right? I had recently been divorced. Things were shifting a lot in my career. It was just a time where I said, if I'm not accepted, if I lose the connection of those around me, then that's also okay. That's also information, and that's also telling me something about the path I'm about to start walking. So
it's like when God said, "Inna ma'al usri yusra," through hardship there is also ease. How even at rock bottom, God's grace and blessings never leave us, because He said, well, since I'm at rock bottom, the only way now is up. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And what happened then?
And so I began to read it and study it. There's an Islamic center, about 20 minutes from my house. And I contacted them and asked if there was a study group. So I joined a study group on Sundays with a few sisters on WhatsApp. And I started to...
You already had felt connected before you approached the center?
Yes, as I had been reading the text and reflecting on what I was reading, I started to say, I want to understand this more, and I want the support to understand this more. And so they were very welcoming.
Do you remember what is it that you read that made you feel this? Was it a certain verse or a surah? Or
it wasn't necessarily a certain verse. It was the fact that this had been revealed so long ago in these various ways. And I felt like it was the key. It was almost the simplicity of it and the profundity of it. So the simultaneous simplicity and profundity of it was so inspiring in general that I said, I want to know more, and then as I started to study it, I started to understand submission in a different way. And
what did you understand about submission?
submission in the sense that what I had been given, kind of like what you just said, what I had been given, right? The cards that I had been dealt, the plan that had been laid out for me was actually perfect. And I could either choose to stay as a victim, right? I could choose to stay in victim mentality, or I could choose to relish and to relish in and use what I was given to create more good and more love in the world, right? I could actually use this, I could alchemize this pain and the loss and all of the things that I was feeling to create more for people, to create more good, to spread more ease, I would say, for the people around me. I started to see my work in a different way. I started to see some of the experiences, like the loss of my son, as actually gold that I could use, wealth that I could use to give to other people. And that was really when I started the work of birth trauma processing, miscarriage grief processing. I started to see that it was actually a gift from God, what I had been given. And so to submit to what I had been given felt like I was no longer resisting life.
What did it feel like when you arrived at that point?
I felt freedom.
Wow.
And I realized that through this understanding that this is what freedom really feels like, and everything else is a human construct. All of these prisons.
And it's not what we thought that freedom is, right? We think it's traveling somewhere far away where no one knows us and building a hut on an island. But in reality, it's to be free from my own suffering.
To be free.
Through the surrender to God.
To be free from my own suffering, yeah.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And what happened after? I'm going to keep interrupting you. I'm so sorry,
No,
but this is so beautiful what you're saying.
Not at all. I'm enjoying the conversation so much. So then
Likewise.
After that, it was maybe like 4 months after I was close to finishing the Quran, I decided that I wanted to take Shahada. And
what was that moment? What happened exactly that made you feel like I'm ready? I want to do this.
Well, I had started praying every day, and I woke up one day and I prayed Fajr, and I said, today is the day that I commit to this.
Wow. It was a spontaneous event.
It was a spontaneous event. It was a Friday.
It's amazing. How perfect. Friday, Fajr, you decide you want to commit.
Mm-hmm.
So blissful.
It was.
And what was the experience of praying like, especially the first few times or the first time?
Well, to prostrate and to have my head on the ground was a completely different experience for me energetically. And sometimes I would stay, I'd go back to that position after praying. I'd go back to that position and make supplications in that position. And that also really amplified what I experienced to be the submission in general, to life and to God. And it's where I find my peace. It's where I ground. It's where I refocus. It's where everything becomes simple again. No matter what is happening in my life, it's just where everything becomes simple. So I have a lot of reverence for the area where I pray, from my prayer rug. Like it's like I think when I'm working sometimes, like I can't wait to go, because I do need to refocus and ground, and I need to reconnect, and so there's reminders I have throughout the day, that I remind myself that I'm connected. But that's really where I can go back to that and ground. And so I felt the power of prayer immediately when I started doing it. And I was, watching YouTube videos and following different YouTube videos and learning, because as a convert, it's something that people don't really realize how lonely it is. Because once when I started going to the masjid where I took Shahada, it's culturally very different, and yes, there's support and, people are kind. However, there's also something to contend with culturally. I don't know anyone in my city that, has converted and shares an American culture. And so a lot of things I was learning on my own and through sisters at different masjids and through online support groups. And so, that in and of itself, that kind of difficulty or that challenge was also I knew was part of my process and part of the journey.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah. I want to ask you, you mentioned earlier, many of those listening maybe don't know the background, but you mentioned the loss of your son. And I'd want to know, how did your new profound faith and your new relationship to God impact that experience for you?
Well, it happened 6 years before I found Islam. And I'd say for those 6 years, there was always this underlying guilt or pain in my heart, in my being, a heaviness. And when I came into the fold of Islam and I understood that it was actually a gift I was given, it was a blessing, and it led to so much expansion, and it helped me help so many women. I saw that it was just the most infinite gift I could have ever received. And I started to feel so much deep gratitude, like all of the pain and the guilt and the regret was replaced with gratitude.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
And so in the submission to this, what I love is that I wouldn't change a thing about anything that happened a second before this moment. And for me,
I can't think of something more liberating than this. To get to a place where you're so okay with everything that led to where you are right now, that you wouldn't want to change a thing.
I would not change a thing. And that's for me true of freedom. So it's a constant, and the reason that the salah is so important is because it's what takes us out, or what has taken me, let's say, I'll speak for myself. It's what's taken me out on a daily basis from wanting to revert into any kind of victimhood. And I believe victimhood is what keeps us, it holds us back. It's what can keep us from having healthy relationships. It's what can just inhibit us in so many ways. And so, of course, we have free will. And of course, we, can co-create experiences. So knowing that everything is for me, how do I use that and how do I amplify it with my free will?
In Sufism, nafs, which is the human self, is understood to be vibrating at different levels, the lowest of which is nafs al-amara bis-su, as you already know. The one right after it is nafs al-lawama, the blaming self. The nafs that likes to blame, to direct the attention away from it and its wrongdoing. At the lower vibration of al-amr bis-su, or the nafs that compels evil or wrongdoing, I would be stuck in my ways because I can't even recognize what I'm doing is wrong.
Yeah.
Through the grace of God and His blessings, when the nafs ascends to the next stop, which is nafs al-lawama, there's this seed of liberation, because I can turn this blame inwardly and I can point the finger at myself. But because so many of us were stuck in our egos, that blame is directed outwardly, and it gets us to be stuck, like you said, in this victimhood mindset. The next step in the evolution of the self is an-nafs al-mutma'inna. It's not a coincidence what you said, because it's the truth. A nafs that is at peace, the nafs that's no longer suffering because of its own doing, And what's so beautiful about what you're saying is the way you're describing salah. It's not like an obligation that you feel like you have to do. It almost sounds like you have a longing to this place where you feel peace and you feel surrender. This is one of God's gifts, I feel, for you, because you weren't born in this tradition. You get to approach it consciously. Mm-hmm. However, so many of us in different parts of the world, because we're born into it, until we realize what you realize consciously, it's almost like an automatic habit where 5 times a day I have to stand and say those things, and make those moves. And no wonder why so many of us don't actually feel connected to it. So I feel what you said holds so much truth. If we approach it the way you're approaching it, I think it's going to be a game changer for so many of us.
Yes, because I feel like it was given to me at a moment where I said, no options seem available to me. And I really just don't even know, do I go left or right? That was the state that I was in, which to be given this text and to be shown this, I mean, how could we ignore that? How could I ignore that, right? And so I know many people don't find that when they grow up in a religion. Of course, I grew up in a religion and I didn't find it that way. And I'll never ever reject my background, and I'll never have any, stuck feelings, stuck emotions around that experience because it has shaped who I am. But,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's the.
And when did you actually announce this to your friends and family? Was it right after you took your Shahada?
Yeah, it was within the week after. And in my nuclear family that I come from, my father and sister were very supportive. And I would say everyone else was confused, and also felt a sense of betrayal, and also incredibly judgmental. But this is what I'm saying. I knew intuitively that this decision would show me where love is conditional in my family.
How did that make you feel when you received this reaction from those people?
What I could have been upset. I could have said, wow, there you are again, judging me or being unsupportive, or you only love me if I do it the way that you want me to, right? I could have blamed them. I could have gone outward, but I said, if I look inside and I'm feeling this deep sensation of unease, it's because my inner child, right? The wounded child, the child that we all have inside, is still looking for something that's not being met. So how do I provide that for myself? Because no one's coming to save you, right? Like we want things from mommy or daddy or whoever still in adulthood. You say, well, maybe it'll be different this time. Maybe she'll see me this time. Maybe he'll finally acknowledge my accomplishments this time. I'm here to say it's not coming. And you'll just continue to suffer and be disappointed. No matter how many times you tell them, I want you to do this. I need you to say this. We can only provide that for ourselves. So how can my adult self say to my inner girl that's still looking for the approval, I see you and I approve of you, and this is between you and God. And that's the bottom line when you're born and when you die. So
that's amazing.
That's when I said, it's okay. I don't need anyone, to approve.
That's wonderful.
And that's when I really felt that I began to individuate from my family, right? We think, oh, it's when I go to university, I'm individuating. It's when I get married, I'm individuating. No, it's when you finally learn that the needs of your inner child will no longer be met by those people. You're the only one who can provide that safety, security, and approval for yourself.
And it's so funny, when I don't give it to myself, how dare I expect someone else give it to me, right?
Yeah.
And I feel with working with so many people, helping them heal their inner children, I also like to remind them of this person who's denying you this feeling that you feel you're entitled to have by them. Do you really think if they can't give it to themselves, they would be willing to give it to you, or they're able to give it to you? These are the two truths I feel when we remember, we dissociate from this victim mindset. The first one is, wait a minute, I'm not giving it to myself, so why do I feel entitled that someone else should give it to me? And the second, this person clearly is suffering, because if they're not suffering, they would be this beautiful, loving, joyful human being that's only radiating with bliss. And since they're not that, it means that that's not the kind of person who's giving themselves what they need. And if they can't give it to their own self, how can I expect them to give it to me?
Of course.
How do you feel everything you've learned through Islam and your new relationship with God had affected your career and what you do with the women you work with?
Well, it's given me a different framework for holding space for grief. It's given me a different type of faith in the process, right? Rather than understanding birth and pregnancy from this more kind of medical evidence-based physiological approach, I also now see it as something that is divinely and perfectly orchestrated for that woman. And so, of course, I'm not really influencing my sessions with that perspective as far as trying to change the way they see their experience, but the resonance that I'm in is felt, by who I'm working with and what I teach and the students that I have. And they'll start to see it from their own perspective, but they feel the resonance as well. And so they're trusting in the process. I mean, that's really the baseline of my work when I work with people, either my students in the doula training, my students in my birth classes, or clients that I'm guiding through conception, surrendering to the process, releasing control, stepping out of victimhood, taking accountability. And this is huge when women want to process their birth trauma and they want to blame the hospital. They want to blame the midwife. They want to blame everyone involved. And I ask them to reverse engineer the experience with me. And we often find that the woman co-created the experience, right? And I want her to get to a place where she doesn't have regret. And so helping her see that this is for her rather than against her is game-changing. And of course, that's what I learned through Islam.
Did you ever experience through your work, had a case where a woman had a stillborn during her delivery?
Yes.
And how do you deal that, especially through this framework of surrender?
So grief is, as you know, such a dimensional experience, and there is no time container for grief. There is no right way or time frame, I should say, to move through it. For some people, it comes to the surface years later, maybe months later, or they walk right into it as the event is unfolding. Grief is like a river. There's calm parts of the river, and then there's parts where it's really just a babbling brook of intensity. And so rather than trying to reorganize the woman and her experience, I simply do what I call, which is creating a container for her to be witnessed in her grief. So I no longer, in the beginning, I think it was a little bit more like this, right? Kind of scripted with my grief training. Now, I don't ever tell her how she should feel. I never try to say things like, well, at least you're alive. It could have been worse, right? Which is what we often get from friends and family who don't know how to hold the intensity in their body. They want to just make it go away for her because they don't want her to feel that anymore. So now what I do is I allow her to move through her grief. And what we often want is just to be witnessed. So she says whatever she needs to say. She asks the questions she needs to ask. And I never have the answer. I just ask her what she feels she's being given, what she feels she's being shown. And ultimately, as the time goes on, we get to a place where I ask her, what can you do with this now? How has this shifted you here? How has this, so I start to ask her, and so that in her own line of inquiry, she can unfold the gift. And it can take a really long time. And I'm in a process with certain women where it's, a year and a half later, and, there's still questions about it. But it's better to be in that place of allowing an authentic knowing to integrate into us, rather than someone telling us how to be and how to act and to box it up and put it in compartments.
I get you. It's like the same analogy of the hospital. We should be approaching it from a place of allowing instead of turning it into something mechanical or surgical. And I believe in my heart that God creates everything with a purpose, not only on the physical plane, but also on the mental, psycho plane as well. And grief serves so much to our spiritual development as human beings, because I believe when there is grief, the heart breaks wide open. And when it does, everything that needs to come out leaks out of it. Those things that we haven't healed in the past, those things we haven't understood, we haven't seen. And that's one of the greatest gifts. And I feel the first step to uncover this gift is to accept that there is one, even if I don't see it right now, even if it's not available to me at my current level of awareness. I trust that if I keep my heart open and I lean towards the pain instead of away from it, like you've shared with us earlier through any substance, whether it was vape or social media or anything else, there is great mercy that God can bestow upon us. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
What would
that's so
you
beautiful.
tell someone who's, thank you, what would you tell them if someone had experienced losing a child, whether through pregnancy or birth or at any stage of life? What is something you feel they need to hear?
What I invite them to reflect on is that no life is less significant simply because of the time it was on Earth. So whether it's just a few hours or it's an 80-year life where people accomplished many things or, traveled the world or whatever it is, every life has played a equally significant role. And what is this child giving you? What has this child given you? Right? And kind of helping her see the significance in the experience of the pregnancy, in the experience of what it is to now she's a mother, whether the baby is with her or not, she is a mother. So she's been given this new role, this new title in the world, and that she should honor that life. And when people, ask her, how many children do you have? I have one. And, here she's no longer with us. I'm still a mother, and now it's this child, this older sibling has created space for a different life to come in. And so what has it shown us? What has it taught us? So giving that life that amount of significance really helps her integrate the process, and to see that there's a wisdom that child has given us, and there is a wisdom in why God has done this. And sometimes, like you said, it's not completely clear in the moment, but it starts to reveal itself if we stay present with the knowing that life was very and is very significant.
That's wonderful. Is there something from the Quran, a verse you came across that when you read, it gave you this sense of peace, this sense of, surrendering? There doesn't have to be, I'm just curious.
No, I would say it's not a specific verse, but more the experience of reading the Quran and of listening to it, even if I'm still in the very beginning stages of learning Arabic. But again, it's just understanding the story of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and how this was revealed. And when I made Umrah in May of this year, being in that environment and being surrounded by all of the brothers and sisters on, in our group and also there in Mecca, I felt very held. I felt what I consider to be the ultimate masculine containment. And so in that containment.
Why is that?
What's that?
Why do you call it that?
Well, as a woman or as a child of God, right? That's what we want. We want that containment, to know that it's being taken care of. And that's what Islam has shown me. It's being taken care of. And so I can submit, and I can always do my best with the guidance and the structure that the Quran gives me and the Hadith gives. I can do my best, but I know that it's being taken care of in the perfect and divine order. And so that type of containment, I call it masculine containment, because as a woman, that's what we want. We want to surrender and submit into that. So when we have good leadership, we have good containment, we can flourish. So that's how I feel that I've been able to flourish, not only as a mother, but in my work, as a friend, to the women in my life, as a human being, is that ease I get with that containment that I'm offered. And so it's really the container of Islam, I would say, that offers me that more so than specific verses that I've come across.
And was there a specific moment during your Umrah you felt this experience, peak?
Yeah. I was able to go to the very top, like there's on the roof level, which was closed. And the security guard let me enter. I spoke with them and they said, I'm a photographer originally, an ethnographic photographer by trade. And so I took a film camera to document this experience, and I'm working on a series of paintings right now to depict the experience I had in Mecca and Medina. And so I explained that to him and he said, you're more than welcome to take a photograph from the roof. So I went and I saw everyone, the visually experiencing Tawaf from above and imagining all of these angels above everybody. Like I felt that I could feel the presence of my physical body being the only thing between me and God. Like it's just the physical 3D body that I'm in that separates me, or I believe it separates me. And so that was where I felt the veil really thin and I felt completely connected as far as energy goes.
You remind me of, I'm a fan, I can't say I'm a fan, it's more than that. I have a strong passion for linguistics because I feel language can help people uncover lots of truths. It's no coincidence that the first word in the Quran was Iqra. Even in the Bible, the first verse was, first there was the word, right? And the word insan, which is Arabic for human or person, is derived from two words actually. The first one is ins, or unsiya, meaning intimacy and closeness. And the other one is nisyan, which is forgetfulness. So to be a human is to forget the intimacy and the closeness you once had with God, which always is there, but there's this veil that you talked about on the heart that creates this illusion of separation, and in that separation we suffer. That's why the Prophet, peace be upon him, has a hadith where he says, to everything there is a polish, and the polish of the heart is the remembrance of God. And in Sufism, the heart is viewed as a sacred mirror that is supposed to reflect the truth, al-haq, which is one of God's 99 names, or infinite names, should I say. And this mirror gets stained as we develop as humans through our egos and our sins, our forgetfulness. And that's why whatever we're seeing, that reflection is impure. We think we're seeing reality, but we're not. We're seeing the reflection in the mirror of our hearts. And through this remembrance, whether it's done through a beautiful experience like going for a Umrah, or just simply praying at home, or doing any dhikr throughout the day, we're cleansing this mirror so that finally this mirror can be pure and it can reflect the truth. And this is the level of the term in Arabic, al-awliya as-salihin. The closest translation for it is the saints, the friends of God. They get into a state where they're perpetually experiencing and witnessing God through every moment they're having, whether it's simply looking at a tree or playing the piano or driving their car. So it's incredible what you had. I'm so happy you got to experience this.
Yeah, when people in my life have asked me like, what changed when you started, practicing Islam, when you went into Islam, and there's obviously a larger conversation there, but I always say I began the polishing of my heart. That's my one-line answer.
How beautiful. How serendipitous.
I love that you said that.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. To wrap up, to just gently go back into the first topic we opened with, what is a few things or something that you feel women, if they avoid it during the pregnancy, not the delivery, they're going to have a better experience then, and they're going to be serving their bodies and the babies better? Do you have any tips for that?
Something that you think you're asking that they could avoid or should avoid?
Should avoid, should do. Any tips for the pregnancy period?
Sure. So I'll go with what I really recommend women do. So there's a few. One,
thank you for being so generous with us, by the way. I truly appreciate it.
Yes, of course. I'm enjoying the conversation. One thing, of course, is reconnecting with the body, right? And so that means movement. That means spending time outside. That means honoring the body, right? Honoring the temple that is the body through food, nutrition, and movement. That's the
Why
physical.
movement?
So we've become a very sedentary society. And as I've already said a few times, I am an anthropology major. So movement was a big thing that influenced how the tribe either was successful or not. And so if we look at the human physiology, which through my work with Dr. Bradley and studying human physiology and pregnancy and birth, we have to move how people have been moving for thousands of years, right? And that's not constantly exercising. That's not a pregnancy Pilates class. That's not prenatal yoga. It's not something that we've made up in modern times. It's simply resting in a squat, right? Rather than sitting in a chair, you squat. This is one of the most beneficial things for male and female human physiology. It opens the pelvis.
Why?
It opens the pelvis. It adds elasticity to the perineum. It starts to prepare the mother's body for birth. If we look at photos, depictions, paintings, drawings of different women throughout history, they're weaving in a squat, they're cooking in a squat, they're making bread over the fire in a squat. I mean, there's so many ways in which it was just integrated into our lives. And many women now that I work with, it takes us a few weeks before she can even get into a half squat, right? This is how our bodies have been deprogrammed, especially in American culture, let's say. So there's that. How do we rest, right? We rest in a squat, or we have different positions that we rest that are doing something positive and productive for our human physiology. Are we walking barefoot? Most people don't walk barefoot. And what we don't know is that our pelvic floor is highly influenced by the health of our feet, as far as the spreading of our toes, right? How wide can they spread? Are the muscles in the feet developed? For most people,
and we're ruining them with our modern shoes that just make the toes super pointy.
Exactly. The fashion, which, okay, I love it. The modern design, there's so much beauty, right? You look at Italian shoes. Okay. Yes. However, we're treating our feet like veal. We put them into these tiny containers, and we're kind of walking like this because we're not actually using the toes and the muscles. And so many people, women and men, have pelvic floor issues, right? Incontinence, for example. We don't realize.
And after that so much of trauma is stored actually in the hips and in the pelvic area, and we're just throwing fuel to the fire.
Exactly. We're compounding the issue. So like the homework that I give to my clients, sometimes they're like, I don't understand how this is related. But as they start doing the program, they start seeing differences. Their posture even changes. So get out of the chair, get in a squat, and you just need to walk 30 minutes twice a day. You don't need to go on some CrossFit program to prepare your body for birth. Doing natural movement patterns. What's a natural movement pattern? Walking, climbing a tree, which most adults won't do again in their life, right? Oh, we left that behind as children.
Which is so sad.
Swimming, that's another natural movement pattern of the body. So what are natural movement patterns? It's not ballet. So that's what I would encourage women to do on the physical level. You want to have 80 grams of protein minimum per day in the pregnancy, which is very challenging now because a lot of people, they're not doing as much meat. People are, on the fad of veganism or plant-based. And so it's fine. However, in pregnancy, there's an element of sacrifice in this process, right? And
why is it
so
important?
it's important because what the protein does, the higher intake of protein raises the albumin levels in the blood, which is what helps keep
And
the
what does that?
body detoxified.
Okay.
It helps. So we want to avoid gestational diabetes. We want to avoid preeclampsia, hypoxemia. We need high levels of protein in the body. We need vitamins A, D, and K from animals, not from kale. It doesn't metabolize the same way in the body. So there are specific dietary recommendations that are really rooted in more traditional ways of eating, animal fat, dairy, meat. And it's not what people would often think, right? So there's that element. There's also the more psycho-spiritual element of resolving and unbraiding certain dynamics in our family and where we come from. This is one of the most beautiful ways to prepare for birth, to prepare for parenthood, is it's not about rejecting, it's not about tolerating. Some people say, I can be in the same room with my mother now without fighting. Well, that's fine, but I don't know that that's really the end goal. The end goal is to integrate them, to integrate the story, not to tolerate, because there's still a high level of rejection in the tolerating of somebody. You're just.
And what do you mean by integrating?
Integrating, again, seeing the gifts that were given to you, seeing how this person shaped who you are, removing yourself from the expectations and the attachment to them loving you a certain way, treating you a certain way. So it's almost doing that inner child work and doing the work to say, yes, they're my, family member of whatever kind. Yes, they did this to me. Yes, it was painful. Yes, I don't know if I can, I say that I forgive them, but really on a cellular level, I haven't let it go, So doing the work to integrate that it was all perfect, in family constellations work, Bert Hellinger calls it integrating the perpetrator, where we're no longer in rejection of the story. And so if we don't address these things in the pregnancy or in preconception, it will come back once your child is born. It always comes back because it's waiting to be healed. It's waiting to be.
It's funny, people keep saying that I promised myself I'd never be like my mom. And as soon as they have a child, that manifests in their behavior. And it's because of exactly what you're saying right now. The story hasn't concluded. They haven't learned the lesson yet.
The story hasn't concluded. And so if we look, even on a cellular level, it's being passed down, the information, the patterns, right? And even in storytelling through generations, stories, beliefs, that's all being passed down. So how can we really just take inventory of that in the pregnancy and start to integrate? And some people say, I haven't spoken to my mother or father in 10 years and I don't plan to. Okay, well, how can you integrate the story and how can you integrate what they've given you? How can you see the wisdom in the experience? And so that's what I mean by integrating them in the process, because again, the pain of it will come up once you start to parent and you'll be repeating the patterns.
So it's not like a choice you can opt out of it. You're just postponing it for a future time. And it's not going to get easier. In my experience, it just gets more complicated because there's more players involved in the game now.
There's more players involved in the game, and who wants to be in the final moments of life without this integrated, right? Ultimately.
Absolutely.
So
it's so beautiful. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so there's that. And then of course there's the foundational birth education. Like really, how do we dismantle the fear grid that we hold about this process? Some women say, I'm not even worried about the birth itself. It's having the new baby that scares me. Okay, so how do we dismantle the fear around that? And that really comes through birth education and practicing informed consent, making informed choices, and really taking back your agency and saying, well, I am going to opt for the epidural. I am going to still do these things, but now I have a different level of consciousness. And now I know that if I do the epidural, these are the side effects, and I am willing to live with that possibility. Mm-hmm. If we're willing to live with those possibilities, then we have more agency, more empowerment. But it's when women feel like things are crashing over them, the waves are crashing over them, they don't understand. It's because they avoided the education in the pregnancy. They kind of dug their heads in the sand and said, someone else will take care of it. The doctor will take care of it. The doctor will tell me what to do. But in the same way you're expecting them to tell you what to do, you're also going to blame them for your situation later.
Wow. And just as a quick side note for anyone listening, I highly recommend anyone who's expecting a baby anytime soon to book a one-on-one with Eyla. I'm going to link her website under this video so you can get in touch with her. Just being with her right now in this conversation has taught me so much. So it's going to be invaluable what she's going to teach you in your own journey as well. I'd like to go back just to a few points that you mentioned about the physical, the movement, right? The nutrition. And then you said about healing the psycho-emotional blockages. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And it's the birth education, correct?
Yeah.
About the movement, I just have a few tips, if you don't mind me sharing as well. When you were speaking about the toes and the feet, one way to fix that is to get those, what some people might call ugly socks, where each finger, each toe is separated, the same way you would wear a glove, which is more natural, so the toes can be more free to move the way they're supposed to be moving, and investing in a wide toe box shoe, which allows the toes again to be in where they're supposed to be. I have a flat foot actually in one of my feet, and I realized that part of the cause for the flat foot and part of the remedy for it is to fix the toe posture. Because if the toes can push out again and push down on the ground, it creates an arc in the toe. In the foot. And that by itself fixes the posture because, again, in the same foot, I have a flat foot. That my knee bends inwardly. And I keep trying to fix it in the gym and in exercise. And I realize one of the simplest way to fix it is to create that arc because it naturally pushes the knee out. And that creates like a chain reaction throughout the entire spine. And the part where you were mentioning integrating the story, something I keep teaching all my clients, is just something to remember all the time. Maybe I didn't have the father or the mother that I wanted, but I had the father and mother that I needed for my spiritual development. We forget that the purpose of life is not to feed and sleep and to give birth. This is all natural and it's all beautiful, but literally every other creature is capable of doing this. I believe we've been chosen to be on this beautiful journey, given the only gift that God made it exclusive for humans, which is free will, is to grow spiritually. And the only way for that to happen is through nafs, which is the self or the ego. And how can that happen without having any pain in my life? It's impossible. It goes back to the same concept of trying to avoid the pains of life when, in fact, it's the prerequisite to the ultimate purpose of coming closer to God and re-establishing that intimacy and dissolving the illusion of separation. So if you accept the villain in the story, there can be no more pain because that villain transforms and like you use it, they become alkalized or alchemized. I'm not sure how you...
Yeah.
Alchemized, yes, as the teacher. And then you don't have to forgive anymore. It just becomes this natural state of acceptance. Thank God for
gratitude.
This person. Thank God for the pain that they... Yes, 100%. Which is a much higher vibration than feeling a grudge or holding a grudge towards someone else. Which, by the way, why do you feel so many people fail at doing this? What stands in their way? What is something that... In general, when it comes to forgiveness and integrating?
Well, I don't even like to use the word forgive because it means I am above you. I am pardoning you and you are below me. Right? Only God forgives. So I say, I accept what you did. I accept what you said. I accept you for those actions, right? Because it's about accepting because we are the same. So I never put myself above anyone with the word forgiveness. And so I think
it's so humiliating, just viewing it through the lens that you just shared with us. I love that.
Yeah.
And the second thing, sorry?
Yeah. And so I think many people do fail at doing this because they still have an unmet need. So they can't accept, they can't integrate the perpetrator or the villain, because they still have an unmet need. And so for them to say, yes, I forgive you, it's, it's fine, we're moving on, but there's still an unmet need. And so they fail at this integration because they still have to figure out how to meet that need for themselves. They're still expecting something outside of them will meet the need. And so that's why I invite people to provide that for themselves, right? And that's where the real pain is, right? The abandonment, the rejection. Those are the core wounds we develop as children. And we say, well, I'm successful now, we have a good relationship now, everybody's healthy, everything turned out fine. Why do we negate that there was an unmet need, and why do we avoid just nourishing that for ourselves? Because it is a gaping hole, and the only way to close that, to seal that, is to be able to offer that to ourselves in every day. We have a highly codependent society, not just with each other in relationships, but like you said, with substances. And it's because of that gaping hole, that unmet need. So people say they forgive, people say they tolerate. Do they truly integrate? I don't think so. But it's because we have an unmet need that we're not meeting for ourselves, and we're still expecting someone to come and save the day. And how this can really overlap into the birth space is that we start to parentify our medical provider, for example. Was I a good girl? Did I do it right? I took all the medicines, I did the tests, and so if the doctor says, yes, you need to do this, you'll do whatever they say. And that's why many women say they felt abandoned by their doctor. They went to the golf tournament instead of the birth, and some backup doctor came, or, my doctor told me this was safe.
It's like they assigned the role to the doctor that they didn't subscribe for.
Right. I like to say mommy medicine and daddy government. We do it on a we do it on a larger scale. We do it on in the birth realm. We do it in many ways. We parentify those in authority, hoping that somehow those unmet needs are going to get satiated. So I just ask women, are you okay with displeasing your doctor? You say, no, I don't want him or her to think that I'm weird because I want to do this alternative thing in the birth. I don't want them to disapprove. And I say, so interesting, because you're paying them for a service. They actually work for you. And
we just forget that.
You forget that, and your body better than they do because you've been in your body for 35 years. So why are they going to tell you what you're feeling? So it's just an invitation to start to analyze and feel into what roles we are assigning to people and what power we're giving them.
Yes. I feel so much of that is because the association in anyone's mind, man or woman, doctor is authority.
Yeah.
So when she's trying to please the doctor, she's trying to please that authority. In Sufism, the understanding is, I am in this world, but I am not from this world. And just by realizing this, it makes it incredibly clear that whatever needs I have cannot be met in this world, especially the higher spiritual needs. But because we are in a state of forgetfulness, we go and try to meet those needs where they cannot be met, and that can only create more suffering. I say, you suffer if your need is met, and you suffer if your need is not met. And the first suffering is even more severe, because if you suffer because your need is not met, at least or you have a sense of knowing why you're suffering. But if whatever this person is, a doctor, a friend, a father, met your need, now you have a bigger suffering. Now you're attached. Now you're dependent. Now this is a form of slavery, where you're willing to do anything just to keep getting this small rush of feeling like you're good enough because that person said you are, or gave you a certain look, or said a certain word. That's not freedom. And it's also understood in mysticism and Sufism that one of the purposes why, or could be the biggest purpose why God created the universe as we know it, there's a hadith Qudusi, which is a hadith or a saying narrated through the Prophet on behalf of God that says, لَقَدْ كُنْتُ كَنْزًا دَفِينًا فأحببت أن أعرف فوجدت الخلق لأعرف, which translates to I was a hidden treasure and I loved to be known, therefore I created existence so I may be known. So everything in the universe is a manifestation of God's infinite names. Everywhere I look, it is only the self-disclosure of God and his attributes. So for example, one of his many names is Al-Qayyum, which translates to the one who sustains all but is not sustained by any. Which means that need that I have inside of me can only be met with the one who sustains all. It cannot be met by anyone else. And if we look at the name Al-Ghani, which in Arabic, some people understand it as the one who's rich. But I'm getting a bit technical here with the language. Al-Ghani actually means the one without need, right? So being satisfied is not about having all my needs being met, but it's considering the possibility, what if I drop so many of those needs? What if I don't need to carry them in me all the time and go beg other people and start bargaining with them and bribe them into trying to meet this need? And instead, I turn inward and upward to the source of all that is. And that this is my faith, this is my belief that is the only place where I can be satisfied, which is reaching in nafs al-radiyah, the soul or the self that is content, which is the place many people might call paradise.
Yes, yes. Wow, that's really powerful. That's beautiful.
Thank you for letting me share that. You inspired me to bring it into the conversation.
I mean, the one who is rich is the one who is free, and it's the one without the needs, the one who has no needs.
There we go. Eyla, it's been absolutely beautiful speaking with you. I haven't done an interview in years, and I am so thankful and grateful to you and to God for making this happen. I can't wait for our future conversations.
Likewise.
Again, to anyone watching us, please give Eyla a follow. Find her on social media. You'll find all her accounts below. And if you're looking for more in-depth training and help and consultation, Eyla is where you need to invest your time and energy. So give that website also a look. And thank you for tuning in for this episode.
Thank
Eyla,
you.
thank you so much once again.
Thank you.